Hello, Sounds of the World listeners. This is Gino Brand, host of the Liquid Sound podcast. We're a show dedicated to music, songwriting, and the creative process. Each week, we have on a different guest musician who shares their songs, and we dive into the finer points of songcraft, recording, and live performance. If you're a fan of these great in-depth music interviews you hear on Sounds of the World, give Liquid Sound a listen. We really think you'll enjoy it. It's available on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Just search for Liquid Sound. Thanks. And now, back to Hillary and Bill.
Welcome to the Sounds of the World. We are your hosts, Hillary and Bill.
Together, we're going to travel around the world to discover new music, discuss musical topics, and interview fascinating people.
Our world is a buffet of music, and it is time to eat. All right, everyone, welcome back. That was a brief sample of a heartbreaking work centered on the last few words of unarmed black men that were killed. The title of the piece is 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. The composer of this piece is our guest today, and we're so honored and excited to have him. He hails from Atlanta, where he went to Emory University, receiving his bachelor and master's degree. He's since gone on to study at the Yale School of Music. He's been a composition fellow at the Aspen Music Festival and School, where he worked with composers Stephen Hartke and Christopher Theophanidis. He's also an Emmy Award-winning composer, but also an educator. He has taught at the Holy Innocents Episcopal Church in Atlanta and served as director of choral studies and assistant professor of music at Andrew College. Please welcome to our humble podcast, Mr. Joe-elle Thompson. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's such an honor to talk to you. Actually, your piece, The 7 Last Words, was actually a real big inspiration for me. And my dissertation piece was talking about similar ideas, but it compared interviews and current poetry with the poetry of Langston Hughes and asked the question of how far have we come in 100 years. So,
yes.
But it's a beautiful piece. But before we get into music and pieces and things, maybe we could get some background on you. So
sure.
Let's just give like your background, where you're from, and maybe some musical upbringing.
Yeah. I was raised in a very musical family. The center of music making was the home, but also church. I became my church's pianist in my high school years. And it was there that I got like a hands-on opportunity to see how music created community and how communities create music, and that cycle. And that's been really essential to my craft moving forward. But yeah, I think my parents sang and still do sing. And that was my first entryway into music making, and the piano followed shortly afterwards. When I was in high school, I signed up for band even though I didn't know how to play an instrument. And the assistant director pulled me into a room for like the first 2 weeks and taught me the basics of the bass clarinet, and then threw me into the tank. And I kept afloat for the next 8 years playing in wind ensembles. And so that's getting to be a part of the band world for, almost a decade was also crucial to my musical DNA, I suppose. But then in college was when I got back to singing in choir outside of a religious institution,
Right.
And I immediately fell in love and got a master's degree in choral conducting. And the places that I taught at, like Holy Innocents Episcopal School and Andrew College, I was there as the choral dude, in charge of making choral music for those respective academic communities. So choral music and singing is definitely at the center of my oeuvre today.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It came from the home first off, and how important it is at home with your family, and then the church, and we, I have little ones, and we try to encourage them to, interact with all kinds of music. So
yes,
even in these hard COVID times, it's fun.
Definitely. My sister, my brother is a very avid TikToker. And he's a medical physicist by day, but he's a dancer, beatboxer, violinist by night. And
oh wow,
he's just going all over TikTok. And he'll keep sending me videos, and my sister will send, she has perfect pitch.
Oh
she
wow,
was able to, we listened to a lot of Take Six growing up. Tight harmonies. She could listen to a Take Six track and transcribe it. She's that brilliant. And they've not chosen music as their professions, but they're such great musicians. And so they've been sending me, little things over the COVID tide. And I just can't wait to go back to Atlanta and jam with them. My sister sent me a text. We're trying to kidnap my brother because he lives in Nashville now.
Okay.
To bring him, make him stay in Atlanta for a little bit longer so we could jam and record something or something. But yeah, we'll see.
Right. Just tell him he has to quarantine for a while. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Your family was from Jamaica?
Yeah, both of my parents are Jamaican. They had me though when they moved to the Bahamas. My dad was a professor of physics at the college at the Bahamas. My mom was a middle school teacher at Bahamas Academy Elementary for a number of years, but that's the island in which I was born, Nassau, New Providence. But the law there is that you adopt the citizenship of your parents. So I was a Jamaican citizen and became a U.S. citizen when I was an undergrad. We moved to the U.S. when I was 10, first in Houston, Texas, and then in Atlanta. And it's really Atlanta that I consider home. I think a part of this sort of moving childhood and feeling a little bit unmoored or not really belonging to a specific place has influenced my music as well. Growing up in a homogeneously Black country that is dependent upon essentially other countries, predominantly white tourists, for our economy.
Right.
There is an awareness of this overarching system, overarching hierarchy, in which you can see who has money and who does not, and it usually corresponds to skin color. But still, they're being Black in the in the Caribbean is very different from being Black in the United States. And I definitely had to learn that when I moved here for middle school years, which is rough for anyone. Yeah. And so I'm not Jamaican enough to really be Jamaican. Right. I'm not Bahamian enough to be Bahamian. I'm not, and then, talk to every Black person in America, and there's a sense of like, this is home, but it's missing something. And sometimes it doesn't feel like home. And so there's this feeling of always being on the outside, always bearing witness to, that I think does influence at least the perspective that I'm trying to communicate and express in my music. But yeah, that's a little tangent, I guess.
That's okay. We like to go off on tangents, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So what got you interested in composing? You had done band and then vocal, so you're like, I need to start composing still.
Well, I don't know. I think for most composers, I don't know. I'm not going to speak for most composers. I'm going to speak for myself. For me, it was because I had experienced so many different transcendent moments in music making, in music experiencing. And I wanted to try my hand at like creating one of those moments, Right. It felt so good for me. So I want to be able to see what would happen if I tried my hand at that, and I could maybe create another transcendent moment for someone else and myself as well. Yeah, I definitely had some encouragement along the way. I started out doing arrangements. I mentioned Take 6 earlier, that my sister was able to transcribe all of that perfectly. I don't have perfect pitch, but I painstakingly toiled over, pencil and paper, because I heard harmonies and rhythms and things that I loved, and I wanted to know how it worked, what made that work. And so I spent a lot of time transcribing music that I liked, from Take 6 to Mozart. I remember, IMSLP didn't exist forever.
Right.
So there were this wonderful advantage of just going online and finding the score just didn't happen. So I remember being really moved by the slow movement of the, I think it's Piano Concerto number 21, then the famous Mozart one. And I wanted to play it because it sounded easy enough for me to play too, and I was like, let me write this down. I wrote down the whole movement, what I could hear at least.
Wow.
But I think doing that and getting inside the music that I liked in that way, that definitely started planting the seeds of maybe I could do this too. I remember when a fellow church member gave me an early edition of Finale, on a CD. It's like, I thought you would like this, and I was like, wow, thank you, yes. And I was able to transfer my written manuscript things over to the computer. And then in undergrad, I took a couple years of lessons with John Anthony Lennon, who was teaching memory at the time. And I thought that I could do it. I applied to a summer music festival after my senior year. I was still debating with my parents about going to med school, but that's a whole different story. But I got into this music festival, and while there I had a great time, except at the end, I had a negative experience that caused me to avoid composition or just put it in the background. So that's when I switched to choral conducting.
Okay.
And it was only until I was working at Andrew College after the master's degree. That's when I wrote 7 Last Words for the Unarmed. And because I had the habit of the last 4 years writing pieces and hiding them away and not showing anyone, because I did not want to recreate the incident that caused me to doubt myself as a composer.
Right.
I didn't show it to anyone until the following April 2015, when I tried to sight read it, basically. And then someone called Dr. Eugene Rogers at the University of Michigan, and then I sent him the score, and he championed it, and that sort of kicked off a composition career that I had thought I had sworn off, basically, by switching to choral conducting. And then all of a sudden I'm being labeled a composer, and I'm still coming to terms with that being the primary focus of my musicianship. But the more that I do it, the more that it feels like home. This is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. And, a career in music is so ephemeral,
Right.
This can evaporate tomorrow, and I'm comfortable with, or at least I'm trying to be comfortable with, impermanence, and just trying to write the best music that I can, while I can. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah. It's amazing how sometimes the smallest thing maybe not the smallest thing, but something can make you just be like, okay, I'm going to put that away. Like I was even into my PhD my first year, and I was just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. This is not what I wanted. Maybe I need to leave and maybe go to pre-law, go try law school. This isn't something that I should do. And then I got into a program in Paris, and I was just like, went there, had it was just a month, but it just changed everything. And I came back and I was like, okay,
Awesome.
this is where I need to be.
Yes. That change of perspective, that does so much. Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's amazing what those little things will do.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that. I think many times, and I think I've fallen victim to this too, that there's a specific path that one has to take. We know that there are pipelines that are set up, and if you want to get to that spot, you have to follow this path. But at least from what you've shared, and I know of my journey as well, it's been quite circuitous to get to this point.
Oh yeah.
But all of those things inform who we are as musicians, and that comes through in our music. So yeah, I'm grateful for every step of the journey, even the parts that I didn't want to do this.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, even Hillary, she was almost done with an engineer's. Like, she was right into that path, and then she couldn't do it anymore. So
yeah,
it's amazing.
Wow.
So what are some of your inspirations that you really loved and listened to?
Esperanza Spalding.
Okay.
She's amazing. Just the way she thinks about music, huge inspiration. My family, like the music we make together. It might not be anything special to anyone else, but it's the glue that holds us together.
Right.
From the minute we see each other again, we're singing and dancing and making music. So my family's definitely a huge inspiration. Bach, Rachmaninoff, Brahms.
Some great vocal composers.
Yeah. Who else? My teacher in undergrad was a piano teacher. Deborah Thorison is a huge inspiration. and Dr. Laura Gordy. When I came to Emory, I thought that Chopin was the be all, end all of music. I was like, this is the pinnacle.
Right.
By the end of my time at Emory, Laura Gordy had me playing the Concerto for Piano and Winds by Stravinsky, and I was like a neoclassical freak.
Yeah.
I loved it. The person walking in would have thought that was too prickly, that's too noisy, but she really caused me to expand my horizons and open my ears and hear music in a new, more exciting way. That didn't mean that I can't love Chopin or anything super melodic, but I just loved the way I loved her pedagogy. She respected me where I was, but still made things that were not as familiar to me really exciting.
Yeah.
And I try to recreate that too when I'm teaching as well. Who else is an inspiration? My teachers here at Yale are wonderful. I mean, Theophanides was, he's a part of the Atlanta School of Music, basically one of the composers championed by Robert Spano, who's been the conductor for years, at least while I've been there in Atlanta. And so I grew up listening to Theophanides, and it's been a dream, like studying with him. Hannah Lash also teaches here, and David Lang and Aaron J. Kernis and Martin Bresnik. I'm studying with him now. So they're all inspirations. But yeah, Esperanza Spalding though. Yeah, she's amazing. I would drop everything. If she would allow me to study with her, I'm there. Just go.
Oh, I feel like that. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of people that if they were just like, yeah, I've got a spot and it's waiting with your name on it, I'd be like, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Going.
Yeah. I'm sure there are more inspirations. Honestly, there are a lot of my peers that are huge inspirations for me, Alexis Lamb, she's a fellow student here. Well, she graduated from the Yale School of Music, but she's a percussionist, activist, composer, amazing human being, huge inspiration. Jessie Montgomery.
Okay.
She and I and Valerie Coleman have been a part of the New Works program at the Metropolitan Opera.
Nice.
And so, I've been a huge fan of Jessie Montgomery for years.
Yeah, I have to admit, I only added her on Facebook because we have the same last name. But, but then, as I got to hear the music, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! I love this."
Yeah, she's great. She's great. She's for strings what I am for primarily vocal music.
Right.
She's. Who else? Carlos Simon.
Yes.
Carlos Simon. I love his stuff. Love his stuff. Yeah. So those are the people we have conversations, we lift each other up. And their music is huge inspiration to me.
Yeah, I love that it's not just, all the old dead guys, but there's living composers that really, push you and strive you to work harder. It's great.
Yeah. Ooh, Courtney Bryan.
Oh, okay.
We had a phone conversation a couple months ago. I should call her again. But yeah, she's also great. And the fascinating thing is that, I don't know, you can get a bit jaded the longer you stay in the classical world, and you see sometimes that beautiful music can correspond to bad personalities and sort of twisted morals, but I've been so fortunate in that the people who I've respected and followed over the years have also been just great people, willing to offer of themselves and really empathetic people, with, no giant egos,
Yeah.
getting in the way. I've been really fortunate to encounter such great musicians like that. We help, push each other and help each other listen to the world in a different way. So yeah.
Oh, I
Great
feel that. I mean,
inspirations. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. The program we went to, where Hillary and I actually met, was in the Paris program, and we were one of 3 people who were from a state school. Everyone else was like, Ivy League or private conservatory and stuff. But and I was just like, oh, these people, they're gonna have egos and they're gonna not want to be around me. And but we've all kept in really good touch, and they're all big supporters of everybody and stuff. It's really cool. I love that.
Yeah. It's amazing too. Like, some of my peers, there's some music of theirs that I initially, like, I just don't get it, or I don't immediately take to it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to know them a little bit more and know what they were trying to do, and then all of a sudden something clicks and, like, the music opens up to you.
Yes. Yes.
And I think sometimes sometimes if we don't immediately get someone's music or get something, we just shut ourselves off to it and we just dismiss it. But always remembering that there's a human element, I think that keeps one grounded. So I'm grateful for my peers for showing me that truth.
Yeah. So you had talked about coming to America as, from the Bahamas and living in Houston and then Atlanta, and kind of Atlanta being your home stasis, so to speak. That definitely influenced your music, as you said. So I guess let's just talk about your piece, America Will Be, if that's okay. So that piece is amazing. I listened to the recording. That was almost like a virtual choir.
Yeah.
And just, even if you didn't have the images there, but you had the music itself. I mean, can you kind of give a little bit of background on the music, like where the text came from?
Yeah. This was a commission by Shannon Lyles. I hope I'm remembering her name correctly. She was the director of the Freedom High School Patriot Singers, a very patriotic name. But that's the name of the high school in Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
And they were a fantastic high school choir, and were recognized and honored by the American Choral Directors Association, the Southern Regional American Choral Directors Association, for their excellent work, for being an excellent program. They were invited to sing at the ACDA convention that year. This was, I think, 2017. And they heard my 7 last words of the Unarmed and commissioned me to write a closer for them. And the idea of their program was I Am. And she basically wanted to introduce everything that the choir could do. But an essential part of who they were was that there were 13 languages represented in that choir, because they were all either immigrants or children of immigrants.
Okay.
She wanted those languages to be represented in the closer. So I had to write a 6-minute closer with all of these languages represented, and sort of extolling the virtues of immigration, because there was a height of anti-immigrant rhetoric at that time, that's only gotten worse. It's waxed and waned, but I think it was really particularly toxic around 2016, 2017. And she just wanted those students to feel seen and heard in this case. And so it was I doubted the success of that piece for some time, but then hearing it again in this moment recently, Tonality released a music video in the last 2 weeks. And I needed to hear that in the last 2 weeks. I just really needed to hear that piece.
I think a lot of us do.
Yeah. just to remind me of what America represents for so many people. So I knew I wanted to use Langston Hughes because I'm a huge fan.
Me too.
I also, and he said it so well in that poem, And then there's the sonnet, the Emma Lazarus sonnet on the Statue of Liberty, and I just used the last portion that's on the base. And putting those two pieces in dialogue with each other is something that I'm familiar with doing. My Hold Fast to Dreams does the same thing between two Langston Hughes poems. But still, with those two, there's dialogue, but something is missing there. And then because I have to use those languages, I thought, why didn't I give the high schoolers prompts? I hope, I dream, I sing, and have them finish it and then translate it into their respective languages. And so all of the members of the choir, finished those sentences. I hope for a new world. I sing to escape. They all finished it in their own way. And then I went through each of them and found the ones that I felt would be the sort of connective tissue between the Langston Hughes and the Lazarus text. And it was all leading up to, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. But also leading to Langston Hughes, for all the songs we've sung, for all the dreams we've dreamed. America was never America to me. And yet, I swear, America will be. It's so moving. I swear, he's referring to, he's writing this at a time in which he's considered a second-class citizen.
Right.
There's so many images of Ruby Bridges going around Facebook in the last few weeks because of Kamala Harris, and there's someone made a beautiful, poignant image, commemorating the fact that there's a Black South Asian woman as vice president elect of the country. And connecting that to the Ruby Bridges incident, but that happened 60 years ago.
Right.
That's so recent, and we tend to sort of think that happened so long ago, but it was just 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Where she was, I think I read an interview that came out commemorating the 60th year of her, being a huge part of integration of the schools. And she said she was traumatized because there would be crowds bringing a coffin with a dead Black, doll in it. And it's just like, that's how violent this country was against someone looking like her walking into a school.
Right.
So when Langston Hughes says, for all the songs we've sung, for all the dreams we've dreamed, America was never America to me. That's what we're talking about there. But the fact that he follows it with, and yet, that's like the most moving thing to me. And yet, I swear, America will be. So like at the lowest point that we are, now with this political chaos that's going on, I like to hold on to that "and yet I swear" part.
And when he says, and yet he's holding America to his standards, though, like he's going to hold that and make that dream come true. That's what I love so much about that poem, and especially with how you said it with not just like the text painting, like when America, you quote America,
Yeah.
And it's...
You caught that.
I did.
Nice.
But it's holding us to that ideal that America was started on, that, this is supposed to be a bastion of safety for all. And things may not always be as bright as they should be, but we should never give up that idea to keep pushing for that.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's such a beautiful piece. And then, so, that you said that there was 13 languages in the choir. So was there like 7 languages in the piece, or did you have all 13 in?
I think I put all of them in there. It was either 11 or 13. I'm just blanking on my prime numbers, I guess. It was 11 or 13. I should know this.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
I included all of them.
Okay.
There's a little build up where I start with Sindala, which is the language of, I believe, Sri Lanka. Yeah. And then I layer it with like Arabic. There's Portuguese, and then there's another one that I'm missing. Oh, Tagalog.
Okay.
Filipino. And then later on, there's Vietnamese, Chinese, German, Haitian Creole, German. Did I say German already? I said German. Yeah, there's a number of other languages there, but I chose to use them for specific textures, for specific reasons, because I was switching back and forth between texts or segments of Langston Hughes's very long poem. So yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. Like, I'm kind of a big theory nerd and analyzing everything. So, but just the use of all these separate languages, like I didn't know that was part of the prompt, but really helped encapsulate that idea of, America being born of immigrants, and it was, like I said, whether or not you had the images that Tonality used with people on boats and things, but the idea of incorporating all these different languages, just really the melting pot that is, or should be America, it was astounding.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think, Langston Hughes, in his poem, he starts with, "Who are you that mumbles in the dark?
Yes.
Who are you that draws your veil across the stars?" And he goes to list, "I'm the one who dreamt a dream, muscle a surf of kings." He goes all the way back to like feudalism and medieval times, and like showing the legacy of oppression and the legacy of hope, honestly, in the face of that oppression, and how America came to represent that hope. And then the rest of the poem casts, a discerning eye on the identity of America. Like, we have been hope in the face of oppression. We have been the one who has lifted up the serf instead of the king. And now look at what we are doing. We're creating these hierarchies in which we're pushing people down and keeping them from life, liberty, pursuit, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, the Langston Hughes poem was honestly a very strong guide for the structure of the piece. It's really the spine. But to put it in dialogue with the Statue of Liberty, the Send These to Me, gave it more of an uplift, that I felt was sort of necessary to balance the dark with the light.
It was great, the juxtaposing between the two. There were two things about like the end that really stuck out to me, and one was that low bass note. When I heard that bass hit that note, I was just like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah, it's actually an optional note in the score. It's not even. I think he sang a low, like a C2.
Yeah.
But what I have notated in the score is a C3. But Alex Blake asked if I have a guy who could sing. Do you want that? I'm like, sure, whatever. And I wrote it for high school choir, so there's like also a high C at the end. But in the score, it only goes up to a G. But Alex was like, I also have a high C, so we could do that too. So I was like, okay, fine.
Let's go over 5 octaves.
He just wanted to showcase the ensemble he had, which was a very good ensemble.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't necessarily in the score. I was definitely mindful of who I was writing for.
And when I read that it was like supposedly high school students, I was like, what? High school students hitting this? I don't. But also the chord makeup itself, like it feels that one with also Hold Fast to Dreams and a few other pieces where you have these kind of ending chords that don't resolve. Like they resolve enough that there's a resolution of the tension, but it's like they shimmer, or they kind of, for too much Whitaker in my life, there's a shimmer or a glow to the chord,
Yeah.
Is that like a conscious decision, or you're like, this is where it feels the rest? Or
well, the thing with the America Will Be chord, that one was actually the cadence. I like my cadences. The cadence was prickly, I guess. But the resulting chord was actually just a straight C major chord, where I pondered doing a ninth in there, but I think I just had it resolve up to the third. The Hold Fast to Dreams chord, though, I wanted to keep a little bit of the fact that the dream is still deferred. Yeah, I feel like America Will Be, clings to the sort of bright C major chord, no shimmer really, just carefully voiced. The Hold Fast to Dreams, though, was definitely, a purposeful clouding, I guess, of the chord to show that it's not quite resolved just yet. We have to keep dreaming, because we're not there yet.
Yeah, there's that. I couldn't tell if it was hopeful or if it was pensively resolute, or So
Yeah, I like that ambiguity for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with the type of subjects that it's over, you know?
Hmm.
And you do a wonderful ability to create so much with, like, it didn't seem like there was much divisi in the SATB either.
Mm.
Like, not much. I remember, like, in, what is it, Hold Fast to Dreams, there's a part where you have, like, the altos or soprano, alto, tenors all divisi, and the bass is waiting to come in.
I wanted Or Does It Explode to be as soft as possible. Because in the context of the Langston Hughes poem, he italicizes that,
Mm-hmm.
at least in, like, prints of the poem that I've seen. And there's something so ominous about Or Does It Explode? I was writing this while there were lots of protests happening around the deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, and we were seeing it explode. We were seeing it explode in real time.
Right.
But rather than said it really loud, I had it spoken quietly, and the impact afterwards really loud. And for me, the sopranos coming in on that A is sort of like, in the movies where there's an explosion and then it's just like this ringing in the air after the
Yes.
grenade hits. That's sort of what that big impact on the piano, and then the ring, and then that builds into a sort of primal scream that leads into the aria portion of the piece, Hold Fast to Dreams. Yeah, I think that was sort of the thinking behind that moment, at least.
I love that. I love that you kind of capture the tinnitus, of an
Yeah.
explosion,
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, the first reading for me, like, I probably would have been like, explode. Okay, now we need to go,
Yeah.
But then to think, well, maybe it's more like a pensive question rather than, and then we don't actually hear the explosion. We just hear the reverberation afterwards.
Right.
It's such a cool idea.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was because we are in the impact of the explosion, and that's what I wanted to hold on to in the next part of the piece, which was Hold Fast to Dreams, for when dreams die, life is like a broken winged bird that cannot fly.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this in the tinnitus. I wrote this in that state. And so I think it made sense for me to sort of recreate that state in the metaphor, of the piece, and then have the call to hope to come out of that, because that's what I needed. I needed that catharsis.
No, I understand.
Asking me, like, why I'm writing political music, I'm really writing for myself. I'm just writing to calm myself and, like, make sense of it. It's like doing a puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is that how Seven Last Words came about? It was more of a personal expression of what happened, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most vulnerable raw piece I've ever written, and I don't think I will ever approach that level of vulnerability ever again, because now I am painfully aware of an audience.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I was hiding things away, and it was just a way for me to make sense of what was going on.
Right.
A response to the dehumanization of Black people that was going on around me, and it was a way for me to hold on to my own humanity, to lift up the humanity of all of these men whose lives were taken before their time. In doing so, I was focusing on my own humanity, and it was so healing. I wouldn't say that. It was not a process that I will ever repeat. I was not taking care of myself. It was not, I won't romanticize that at all. I've gotten better at taking care of myself. But once I was done with the piece, I felt so much better.
Oh, okay.
I wrote it in the order that it is presented, when it's performed. And before setting the words, I would read everything I could about each of the men. And if there was video footage, I would watch them die from multiple camera angles and then write down the music that I heard. Would not recommend doing that because I only had my winter break to write. I had no time during the semester. I had to write it in 2 weeks. So I was just like, go, 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 go. And so I was just in the depths of despair for those 2 weeks. But once I was done, I was able to start my spring semester with a spring in my step. But that piece, it was definitely written for a personal catharsis.
But it's amazing that you did this in 2 weeks. It's like, I don't know.
Well, the plan hatched in November, really. I mean, it was in November. I just didn't have time to write it. I had a table in Word of the 7 last words of Christ, and then I chose the 7 last words of the men that I was going to set from Sharon Bargey's Pictogram series, the Last Word series. That's how I organized the piece, and I sort of knew the order that I was going to do it in. But all the writing of pencil to paper happened in those 2 weeks. Yeah.
Do you consider yourself more like a composer-conductor or a conductor-composer? Because we asked Quinn Mason that too, and he's just like, "Ooh, that's a hard one."
It is. That is a very hard question. I will say I miss conducting a lot. Composing is and can be a very solitary endeavor, but I think, as you heard from me describing my musical background, I really love the idea of communities getting together and making music. And a choral ensemble is inherently a community, and I think that's sort of why I like working with choirs in particular. So I do miss that communal space that happens. Granted, I sing in a choir here at Yale, which is now virtual, which is no longer the same sense of community.
Oh, yeah.
So I like being in a choir, but I also like leading a choir. So I definitely miss conducting. But I've learned to embrace the moniker, I guess, the label of composer. So I don't know, maybe I would say composer conductor. Yeah, maybe composer conductor. I don't know. Talk to me next year. I might be conductor composer.
Yeah, Quinn was like struck with that one. He's just like, I don't know, because he always, like you, he loved conducting, and I'm like the only reason I got really into music composing, aside from the fact that I love composing, was I hated performing.
Same.
So
I didn't hate it. I was just like, I would get a panic attack every time I had to do it.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I was one of the, so we, like, in my hometown, there's a little civic symphony, and they always had one person they always went to for keyboard, and I was kind of the other person because I was percussion and keyboard. And we did the Nutcracker, and every year I had to play the stupid Celeste, and it was just, the last year I did it, I was still terrified, and they had it right next to the edge of the stage, and I heard this little boy off to my right go, "You can see him shaking." I was just like, shut. We don't need to point this out.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh.
So, but yeah, that was, so I was like, okay, I need to really invest in going into composition. So, so I guess the last thing I have is, we've kind of already talked about it a lot of the time, was what do you think music can do for fight for social equality or realization of minorities that other forms of art might not be able to do?
That other forms of art might not be able to do. Yeah, I think the fact that that music moves through time, that we attach many basic human rituals to the experience of music, it lends itself to community. I think that's part of why I have such a strong affinity and attraction towards the choral arts, because they're like mini societies. And it's a rare moment in which you have a bunch of people getting together in pursuit of truth and beauty, in a musical context. And I think music is particularly adept at that compared to, the visual arts. Everything's open to individual interpretation, but there's something so communal and sort of a microcosm of society at large, whether it's on stage in the ensemble represented or off the stage in the audience. Like there's a communal experience that allows us. Sometimes music can allow us to be fully aware of ourselves in that communal context. And, some people right now are hearing that and thinking of a Beyonce concert and how everyone's singing along.
Right.
And some of us are listening to that and thinking of, Tchaikovsky Pathétique right before the last movement, and then, like there are rituals, there are communal experiences. Everyone's getting their coughs out so that we can focus on this swan song, like this. I think music is adept at making that happen. Can music fix the problems that we're trying to address? I don't know, but I do know that music leads to transformative, transcendent experiences. This is why we are musicians,
right? Because
we know what that's like and we want to create that for someone else. And that transformative energy happens on an individual level. And if interacting with music that is honest about the Black experience in this country, if interacting with music that is like that leads one to transform oneself towards a more anti-racist perspective and way of moving through the world, then it does change
Right.
the world in a small way. And that's all I'm hoping for, to be honest. One person at a time. 7 Last Words of the Unarmed, which we've talked about quite a bit already, is the one piece that I've written that I don't want to be relevant.
Right.
But it continues to be so. But rather than feeling awkward about that, or dismayed about that, to be honest, I like to focus on the fact that the more people enter that space that the piece invites them to, that space of empathy, that space of understanding, that space of listening to my grief and pain and anger, and by proxy that of, countless Black Americans, that one can open one's ears and one's heart to that struggle and be a part of the solution rather than the problem. It's not going to happen by the double bar line.
Right.
But I think it will at least open the door just enough for someone to try and open it wider and walk through. And so that's what I think music can do. That being said, I take a lot of inspiration from the visual arts. Titus Kafar, he's a local artist here in New Haven with international renown. His art is similar to what I'm doing. It looks very. He'll work with, like, one of my favorite paintings of his is really a painting of Thomas Jefferson, like in the style of the presidential portraits in the National Gallery and in the White House, but it's peeled back and you see a portrait of Sally Hemings behind. And it looks like traditional portraiture. So one might say this is not contemporary. It's sort of old fashioned. It's tonal, as it were. But what is new about it is how he's using these traditional building blocks to say something that's so radical, that forces the viewer to look at the legacy of Thomas Jefferson in a new way and recognize, the raped 16-year-old Black slave that is attached to his legacy. And so it's radical in that way. It's very, fully contemporary. Kehinde Wiley, with his sculptures and also his portraits of the Obamas. Huge inspiration. Just the way he's working with both of those artists are interacting with their own marginalization in the fields that they're working in.
Right.
How revolutionary it is to have a Black guy with dreads and a hoodie on top of a horse on a sculpture, like where one would see a general with a sword and, a white wig, a powdered wig or something, that's revolutionary to put Black people in that context. And that's what I want to do in my art. But I think at the same time that music has a slight advantage, in that it really is not necessarily, it's less didactic, although I wouldn't say that it's didactic at all. But it provides an opportunity for a community to experience it together. I'm sure there's lots of holes in that argument. But that's how I feel right now.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think that music also gives each person within the community their own safe space to deal with what's being presented, Yeah. It's like...
And you can process it together afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Afterwards, I remember going out after a concert with friends, whether, if we performed or we were in the audience, and we would talk about the music that we heard. And and someone who was sitting right next to me had a completely different experience.
Yes.
So it's really cool. Well, thank you so much, Joe-elle. This has been amazing, and it's been inspiring, especially to me. I definitely want to see. I haven't written much for voice, so see what I can kind of cobble together.
Yes, do it.
So thank you so much for being on our podcast.
No problem. My pleasure. It was wonderful talking to you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sounds of the World podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode. There are links to everything in the episode description and also on our website.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Sounds of the World. To show support for Sounds of the World podcast, please join our Patreon, where you can have access to our after-party discussions with guests, discounted merchandise, and even more.
If you have any questions, answers, or episode suggestions, please email us at soundsoftheworldpodcast@gmail.com. Well, Bill, I think I'm going to go have a beer now.
Hey, there you go.